Hey Steve, how's your Tuesday?
All right. Good, thanks. I know people heard me chuckling in the background, but I'm laughing because Andy was here about a half an hour ago. He took his vacation time and came back to San Diego with an Airbnb. So he ran in real quick, dumped off his grocery bag that they didn't use at the Airbnb, let his dog use my backyard, took off to the airport. So yeah, Andy's here in spirit, but I'm running by myself today. So hello, everybody. Thanks for joining. And we'll probably go about 40 minutes today. We'll see how it goes. Yes, John, I see your question, and I will address that. The short answer is yes, and I'll talk about why and maybe where the downside risk would be. So welcome to Trade of the Week after that tease there, and let's get started. First slide, as usual, is I've got some ideas for stocks and give some opinions, but they're not to be taken literally as financial advice. That is, what you guys do with them is up to you. It's just a reminder that we're a software company, and I'm just giving some ideas. They're not to be taken as financial advice, so please don't. The Thanks, Mike. The reminder that we've been around for 14 years. I'm user number 3, basically, aside from Dan and Phil, which are the co-founders. So it's pretty early on the usage side. So what I mean by this is I've seen everything from A to Z, and there's a lot going on with trade ideas, and there's always a lot of new things coming in as well. So for the new user, a 5-day trial at one of our test drives, which we now do for 2 weeks, really is not as good. It's just a 1 month. Take advantage of a promo code. Do a 1 month subscription. If it's not for you, you can cancel. But the point is, you need a 1 month trial to really dive into and get the feel for the program. And the way in which we help you get the feel and lessen that learning curve are the following. Barry's room, is a very much a quality room for free that's open from bell to bell for the most part, and there's hundreds of people in there with a couple of great traders that help Barry take the lead in terms of what's happening today, the wolf pack hunters, if you will. But Barry reminds us often to send people in there from support who need visual assistance, okay? Picking up the phone or asking somebody to call you because you want help with a scan is really not productive. It's not the best use of your time or ours, but going into Barry's room is one of those solutions, and he'll gladly pull up the question and show you something, and that's the best way to learn, all right? So that's one way. We have the afternoon webinars, such as we're doing right now, with more preconceived content. In my case, in Andy's case, a lot we talk about what's happening today in the market and how we can kind of use the program to take advantage of it. And then we also have the Friday support session, which is a must attend. If your very first week you sign up on a Monday or Tuesday and you start to get your feet wet and you all of a sudden are generating some questions, well, you should be writing those questions down, and you should be coming into the Friday support session and saying, hey, having trouble trying to get to this solution, or how would I scan for that, or what would I do to accomplish this? And we will again visually demonstrate it for you, something that you just can't do over the phone. So much like Barry's room and much like we're doing now in the go-to webinar, just come in, ask the question, we'll get in line, and we will give you a visual demonstration and a visual answer. And it's very, very productive, that Friday session. And then lastly, we have what's called the Trade Ideas University. Pretty good attendance for the last couple of weeks, and we're still doing it live. It may go to an evergreen at some point, but for now it's live, meaning you can come in much like we have right now and questions and answer and visually demonstrate once again for you. And the TI University is designed to start off as a course on the Monday beginning session, and then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, before you know it, you're in the advanced session, learning how to back test and optimize back tests and things like that. So right off the bat, there's a 4-day course that you can get involved in, and we also have the recording for people like me who would just say, I don't want to wait 4 days, I want to watch it tonight. So if anybody wants it, there is a pre-recorded version of the TI University. If anybody wants it, you can just request it at info@trade-ideas.com. We'll get you a copy of that playlist link. So tying it all together, that's the things in which we do to try and make ourselves available to you in the learning curve process. So here we are again, man and machine combined. Kind of had a good example for this, a real world example recently, but oh well, just the reminder that the theme every week is we're using technology more and more to help deliver, curate the data and make a decision. And I think it was something along those lines. It was just a statement, curate and disseminate and make a decision. And it's not a one-step process. It's not a machine where we just turn our back. I'll be honest, there are people that come into the support and say, hi, I just want to turn on your Brokerage Plus to Holly AI. Okay, how do I do that? And I'm going to go to work, and how do I make sure that the machine gets me out? And we're like, you don't want to do that. You're turning your back on really your responsibility, and that's just not the way to approach this. The way to approach it is to let the machine bring the curated information to you, and you sift through it, and you become the final decision maker and the discretion. So yeah, the money printing machine does not exist, Waleed. And if you're one of those people, we'll tell you right now, we don't want to sell you something that, that's a promise. So sell you that as a promise, because it's not. It's human, whatever, and machine combined. It works together. Curate, disseminate, and figure out what your solutions are going to be. And that's the way it's going to be going forward, no matter where you work and what industry. All right. I always get off on a tangent on that. I think I updated this. Yes, we will talk about the one from last week as well. John, for your first question, we'll get to that pretty soon. Since Andy's not here, I'll go over NEO pretty quickly. And a few thoughts again on the NEO in general and what's going on over there. The trade of the week was beautiful. It worked exactly as we would hope. It would have been nice for not so much of a gap, but it wasn't a huge gap, so nonetheless. And talk about that. And just a quick reminder in case I forget to mention it when I get to there, yeah, it gapped up. If you're getting the trade of the week and you're anticipating making a play in the morning, and you're seeing, you have the ability to watch it pre-market, and you should have the ability to execute pre-market in your account. If you feel like, and this was one of those trades, and we'll talk about it because that's kind of the theme of the week, right? The email said, what's the secret tell of a strong stock that's getting ready to go? Well, maybe after I talk a little bit about that, the next time you see a stock like EZPW gapping up 20 cents in the morning, you're like, oh, geez, do I wait and see if it's going to fill the gap like it does sometimes, or do I just got to run up and grab this sucker? Well, I think we can look back and see why this might have been a case of I need to jump up and grab the sucker. And maybe you can do it pre-market. So when that bell rings, trust me, when the bell rings, algos go crazy. You don't have much time to make a decision, so you better be ready to decide if you're going to be trading the open on a trade of the week. But I want to get the visuals, so we'll get to that. Again, we'll talk more about the tell of the strong stocks, so I don't want to spoil too much. We'll go through my A-table scan and find some possible setups from last week and revisit the ones that I think were pretty good setups that we gave out last week. All right, so let's start with just really the market recap that we always do. And there's still not much that's changed from yesterday with Jamie, but same thing. The charts don't get much better than that with all the moving averages fanned out and higher lows along the way. It's not always that easy, but right now it's, in hindsight, yeah, it's kind of that easy. But as long as we keep the price above and these moving averages above each other, we're good to go. The only downside is that we get a little ahead of ourselves these last 3 days. And I mentioned in Jamie's webinar yesterday, this is not the kind of chart that you want to be buying the last 3 days of 3 or 4 days of movement. I'll tie that together with one of Neo's trades today. So I'm not surprised we have a little red in there. And if we look under the covers a little bit, we had a flat day yesterday and today. We've held the gap up over the weekend, but we're just going sideways. So we can't expect much for stock movement when the backdrop of the market for the last 2 days looks like that. The ones that are really moving are going to be the ones that have news and have volume for the most part. But staying in tune with what we're talking about on the market recap, shoot, maybe we're in that same position that we were back here when I highlighted, hey, there's our gap. Maybe we go sideways for a couple of days and let the moving averages catch up. Maybe it's going to be that easy. I don't know. But it certainly worked out to be that easy, as we talked about last week in hindsight. And again, another example of really nice compression and then 3 or 4 days of movement. I don't want to be buying a whole lot of things up here unless they're on a really deep pullback, which I'll give you an example of. CLF, I bought this one back in our swing account after a couple of deep days of pullback and a nice little bottoming tail. I actually bought it on the close yesterday, so suffered a little bit of a pullback. But those are the kind of things I'd be buying. Roku was also purchased yesterday a little bit. Nice bottoming tail. I let that settle out and bought that. We'll see how it resolves. But when you look at a daily chart of a stock that individually looks like this, my point is there's just too much space between the price action and this trampoline, this net that holds that catches the rising trend. So there's that. But on the flip side, there's no bear case to be made. It's just we're just grinding higher into a Santa Claus rally, as they call it. Great volume the last 3 days too, I might add. I'm just looking down and noticing that relative volume is kind of strong again at 1.9, not bad. So the one that's been really leading the way is the NASDAQ. Let's look at the Qs. I think I just froze up. It loves to freeze up sometimes when I'm doing the webinar. So we'll just take the awkward silence and just wait for it to change on us. As I was saying, the NASDAQ leading the way, a bit of a tighter range today. It's not even thinking about giving much back after a giant gap and after the same thing we talked about back here, compression into the moving average, sideways action, and it was off to the races again, just like we would said it possibly could do. But now here we are again. We'll see what happens. There's a lot of space in between the price action and the moving average, but the NASDAQ in the bigger picture is the champion. It's the one that's pulling and dragging everything higher. Speaking of pulling and dragging things higher, I'd be lying if I didn't say I was a little miffed at how the IWM has been giving all these little fake pullbacks, these days that look like they want to break out, and then the damn wick shows up. But today, it's trying to get back in my good graces, as we can see. It was up 0.5%, which was more than the other averages. SPY was up a point. SPY was flat, and the NASDAQ was almost flat as well. So actually, there was a little alpha. Maybe this is the beginning of something, and this has actually got that look that I want to talk about a little bit later. Believe it or not, it's just kind of came to me. I just realized that as I'm looking at it, it's looking like it's got that tell. And I don't want to get into it yet, but that's a really good look that we got going right there. All right, so that's it for the market recap. I've got a lot I want to get to, and don't want to take too much time. So next up is just the NEO trades. This morning at about 2 hours after the open, I had to take a screenshot because it ties right in with what I'm saying up here. This is tired action, so it's going to be hard to find a lot of good stuff to the long side. This is a tired backdrop. The backdrop always comes first. Okay, so NEO, we know, is always looking to find relative strength. Let's illustrate that. Relative strength right there. Let's go through these quickly one by one. I like to show that. 13 times normal volume, 6 times normal volume, 7, 3, 5. You get the picture. So that is why I've been telling people, please kind of just disregard. I don't want to talk much about Holly 2.0 or Holly AI anymore. This is where the action is, and this is where I want everybody to focus. Even though today wasn't really a great day, but once again, it ended down $32 on risking $100 per trade. I'm going to say it again, it's not getting people into trouble. And for a new trader who's trying to figure out where to focus their attention and pick entries, there's a lot of 7,600 entries you can pick every day. But what NEO is doing, because of that volume that I just showed you, is using man and machine, human and machine. It's bringing them forward to us the stuff of interest based on volume and based on stuff the AI has found. It's interesting. And from here, we have to make our decisions. All right, so that's a great segue. 2 hours into the market, I shot this today. Notice, and it's sorted by the P&L. So the crappy stuff, this one stopped out down here. But the good stuff is what? It's pretty easy to see. The good stuff is short, and the stuff that's losing is long. So that kind of, I just drew right there, it looks like a big heart. The point is, 2 hours into the day, we still have to make decisions based on the information we're given. All right, so we know that the market's tired. We've looked at it. We know that 2 hours into the day, roughly, only the shorts are the ones that are slowly starting to grind and work. And lastly, one of the reasons I like NEO mostly, because yesterday was a perfect example. You guys that were here yesterday saw the histogram. NEO starts off in the morning not that great. But as you can see, these strategies are designed to be all-time holds based on the West Coast time here. They kick out at 10 minutes to the end of the day. So the real idea is to try and let these things grow and let them work. And all day long, as it were, look how it came out. The top 5 trades, 4 of them were shorts. So that's how the market really, or that's how NEO's trades, that is, really did settle in to the day. But point being, yes, it wasn't a great day. And I'll remind you all that you can go back and run a history down here by right-clicking in Neo, go to history, go to time frame, and down here, pop in November 4th. That was the day Neo started. And once you've done that, just highlight your mouse, and then you geeks, you got to use computer key strokes from here, but Control C copies all that mess, all that data, and then go to your spreadsheet and Control V, drop it into a spreadsheet. And guess what? You can start to sort these columns and start to see that you will see Neo is making money. And for the most part, it's making money towards the end of the day, and it's not getting people into trouble. So today was not a positive day, but it was a learning day, especially for newer traders. And the point is I was making yesterday with Jamie, and I think it's really a worthwhile one. We didn't have this when we first started. We had to learn to react to our own emotions. And when you're trading, emotions are part of the real battle you're going to have to go overcome. And so what Neo is already starting to do for newer traders is bring that emotion of trust a little bit into play and know that it's a long day. It's 6.5 hours. And just because it gets down a little bit in the first hour, these really are designed to have patience and let them grind into the close, because I see it day after day. The worst part of the day for Neo is always the first hour. And go ahead, you can run the data. You can see it yourself. All right. So real quickly, let's take a look at some of these trades and why I would like them or not like them. So knowing, and again, we don't know these, but this trade first came out right there on the open. And what I'm saying is, remember, you have to keep an eye on these trades. By this time in the day, I had already determined, I showed you that screenshot, by this time of the day roughly, that the shorts were working the best. Well, guess what? That's not a bad setup coming right into this area right there. I talk about it all the time. The momentum trades that are going to continue with momentum, that's the inflection point. So even if you missed the open, you're watching, the shorts are all doing well. Look at this. Here comes the moment of truth Steve always talks about. And right there, you could have decided to maybe take a short entry and made money on a second entry. That's what I think about that trade. What do I think about this one? Same thing. It was actually flat for the most of the first 6 candles or so. Then it grinded itself lower. So what showed itself in the morning kind of proved itself towards the end of the day. There's another short. The one that I wanted to highlight, let's see what's going on here. This is a long, and there's our buy point right there, and it immediately stayed out of the money, never really got in it, and slowly ground itself higher. The one that I wanted to look at was no harm, no foul on that one. The one that stopped out, this is the one that was, I just didn't get it. And I actually chatted with Michael this morning, because Michael's in charge of this input for Neo. I said, Michael, it's going to be interesting to talk about this one today, because I talk to the people that show up to this thing every day, and I say, don't be the guy that buys the 5th green candle. And here we got Neo buying it up here. And so here's a great example, guys, of, if you're auto trading this and all of a sudden you get into it, and I was auto trading this, I would immediately get out. I'd forget it, override. All right. And man and machine, right? I'm not interested in trusting this. And I said to Michael, no disrespect, but I'm sure that, he says, the data proves that more often than not, they might work. I said, well, maybe we can tweak a few things. Maybe not have so many green candles, and he said he'll look into it. But, this is a great illustration, and why I wanted to stop on this one, where the human has to jump in and say, no, forget it, cut that one. And I'm just going to say the reason being is you don't want to be the person trading to the long side after 5 green candles coming in. Look how much space was there between the buy candle and that moving average. The larger that space, you're just asking for it. The more you're playing musical chairs. It's just you're hitting headwinds. It's just price action wants to return to the mean. Now, this might be a great setup, and I might go into the trade of the week this weekend and say, wow, this thing is really setting up nicely. Puts a nice little spike in there and grinds down, and it's resting right on the moving average. This could be the trade of the week on Friday. Who knows? But right now, today, after 5 days, no. You got to, as a human, I think, and that's going to be my goal, is to try and help apply the human side of what the AI serves us. This was definitely not one I'd be interested in. And if we look at the intraday nonsense of it, we can see it just didn't land. Look at that. This is the buy up here early, and I hate buying that early too. I hate buying that early on something that's so extended. I'd buy something early that was moving sideways, breaking out of it, but something so extended, you're just asking for it. So not a great one from the AI Neo, but they're not all going to be great. But again, in the bigger picture, Neo is keeping people out of trouble. There was no profit today, but there was really no harm either. And another example of why being patient in the morning and letting some of these trades marinate into the day can be the way to go. All right, more to talk about, running out of time. So let's just remind myself. Okay, the trade of the week. First off, last week's trade of the week was that DDOG. And we just ask, Waleed, are you here? You're here. I know you're here. Did you adjust your entry on this DDOG? Because it did some funky things before it kind of got back to our entry. Let's go back. So there was our signal on the weekend going into DDOG, and that green line, as you can see, was the trade of the week entry. The next day, we went below, and that's why I wanted to lift that that entry a little bit higher, so there was no morning head fake. Okay, then the next day, ooh, another crazy wick. All right, like it tried to go. I was like, oh boy, wow, this thing is starting to look funny. It's closing below the 50-day, but it threw a funny wick in there, and then it threw in this kind of hammer where it ran the stops down here and closed near high. I actually jumped in on the close on this day and got a head start on it, and that's why I was asking Waleed, because sometimes Waleed tells me he adjusted his entry because the entry is different than, or I should say, the information that we have at hand so we can make our decisions are different than it was on Friday. And what I saw down here was a really nice recovery after a couple of bad days that couldn't go much lower. I really liked that candle, and so I decided to jump into it just a little bit early, our swing account. And as we go forward, grounded higher the next day, and I think it actually triggered that day, and then the next day exploded through. Now, John was asking, very first question of the day, is there a re-entry here? Yeah, I think so. It's kind of like we had said before, you know, the second mouse can get the cheese sometimes. This was definitely a nice moving day. We couldn't get any follow through on that. Nice big candle yesterday of a recovery. I thought there might be a chance to move higher today, but we didn't. We popped back down below today, but we did touch a couple of those key averages. I think it would be safe to get in here. So we're talking only 37.18, where the original entry was 36.61, so 40 cents or so. Maybe you can even get a drawdown on the open tomorrow. I'd keep an eye out for that. But what I don't want to see, the risk management of a reentry on like this, is we don't want to see it come back and close below that 50. It did a couple times here and it recovered with a really nice wick there, but I don't want to see it do that again. So you could take an entry in this area, but don't let it close below that 50. That would be my advice there. And again, what I'm doing now, since I like NEO so much and I'm really touting the setups and how NEO delivers great ideas, but some of them might be just a bit out of phase and not quite ready for the jump rope. So DDOG was one of those. It just took a little longer to come back and trigger. And then again, throw in adjustments if you're watching something. We're just trying to put it on the radar and everybody can trade it the way they want. Now this week was also drawn, at least the last 3 weeks, and by the way, DXC. This thing's been a real pain in the ass. It didn't trigger, or I can't remember what it did, but this was also off of NEO. It's been going sideways. It tricked us down here, but it's popped back up in the game. That still might be one to watch. Maybe above those recent highs. But this week, it's easy PW. And this kind of brings us into what I wanted to talk about. How do we find a tail? The minute I saw this, let me show you what I saw. I may have talked about this before. I call it the train is leaving the station. When I say, you know, I love this moving average and moving average coming up to greet the price, that's where all the action happens. That's where the decision point is. Well, sometimes you don't get that chance to let the price touch the 10 period. And a lot of times those are the ones that are the strong held by just the thought of that moving average coming up to touch the price. That signals to me just how strong it is. It's a 10 or 11. And I thought, boy, easy PW, how's that look? Like, you know, 3-4 days, it just didn't want to sell off. Sideways action is the best. And then this little spiky candle there is like almost like was, again, we talked about it a lot in the last few weeks, the move before the move. I thought this thing really has a shot. Now, the funny thing about this week was, if you recall in the email that went out, there was 2 possible entries on this one, and the thought was, yeah, if it shows its hand and the tail is correct, this thing rips, we don't want to miss it, we got to be in it. But let's say it doesn't do that and it gets tricky and it wants to pull back and maybe do another counter move here, which is kind of back here of that moving average had it pulled back a little bit, but it didn't. And so that buy tag or that trigger level was, canceled out by basically the open. If we go to yesterday's open, I think I just froze again. Let's see. Yep. This is the one I was talking about, where if you get the email in the morning and it's Monday morning and you look and EasyPW has traded, 50,000 shares pre-market, and it's trading above what our trigger price is. Let's go take a look real quick what that looked like. I'm going to put on pre-market. No, that's not what I want. Get out of here. Pre-market. Okay. So, boy, look at that. There was a little trade down here at 6:32 in the morning. There was a tick trade there. So there wasn't much. See, I didn't really look at this until now. There wasn't much volume pre-market at all. I'm trying to see if I can read those. No. So you really had to be almost aggressive to jump in. Now, what I did notice is that it did the crazy opening spike, right? The algos literally get ahead of themselves, whether they're doing the shakeout, trying to get you out to the downside, or many times, like yesterday, even on the 15-minute and the day time frame, the algos got ahead of themselves and they reversed pretty hard. And actually, if you really want to get in this trade, sometimes you can get a reversal midday, but I recognize that there wasn't much pre-market activity, and this thing opened pretty much 45. Actually, not that bad. It was only 4 or 5 cents really above. So you had to be on your game. Pay attention to what's happening pre-market. All right, so as it turns out, yep, the train was leaving the station. Now here's something that's really cool, and I was waiting to show you this. All right, I'll go back to that in a second, John. I'm gonna finish my thought here. I thought, all right, the 10-period moving average has all this space in between it, and yes, this is our tell. When the price is just repelled and it's showing an incredible amount of strength, it's not even going to give you a chance to touch the line. I thought, well, I wonder what a 5-period looks like on here. So check out what I discovered. I'm going to change my 10 to a 5. I'm not going to add a new line. I don't want to add more lines. I want to keep it simple. Ta-da. It was actually adhering to the 5. So maybe I need to start adding a 5 to my arsenal for stocks that look like the train is getting ready to leave the station. And I may have found another example from you guys today. AMD looks to me like the train is getting ready to leave the station in AMD. This is the 5-period, right, guys? Because I just changed that to a 5. Let me just make sure. 10, yeah, this is a 5-period. Go back to a 10 and look how much space is sitting there. So what did we learn today? We learned that, see that little flagging action? It wants nothing to do with price. It's almost like a little pennant pointing up, and it's going to sneak away and say, hey, look over there, and try and take off without you. But what I just found out literally last night looking at this, just by adding that 5-period, and it really did show up against a lot. Oh, let me show you something else I learned. I discovered. Let's go back to Easy Pawn. All right. So here's the big takeaway. All right, we're kind of discussed what that tell looks like on the daily chart, and we can line up that 5-period, which was kind of curious. But lo and behold, look at what happened yesterday. I'm going to turn pre-market off, and I'm going to do the same thing on my indicators on the 15. It seems to kind of work the same. Look at that. Yesterday, this thing was so strong. So now we have a fast line and we have a turbo line. I think I just came up with that. And then look, here is where everything flipped. There's where the momentum stalled. I didn't even catch this until now. All of a sudden, the turbo line becomes the down momentum for the day. So, I don't like to use the 5-minute. I don't like to use the 5-minute chart. But look at how this lines up. I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to actually put this back on a 10. It actually shows up when we go to a 5-minute as well, using the 15. So it's almost like they're interchangeable. Time frame, period, time frame. And there was yesterday. Let me go back to yesterday. See, it's kind of the same thing. So really interesting. Wanted to share that with you guys. John, let's go back to your question. I think you were talking about double DOG. Oh no, you were talking about, okay, something. 670. Oh, waited a bit, then got 670. Okay. Let's just see back here. I'm gonna go back to the 15-minute chart. There we go. I see what you're saying. Yeah, when we were talking about that, yeah. I mean, some people actually hopefully didn't pay 686, but you can see that that first candle of the day is just insanity. And it's hard to make decisions in that first candle. But sometimes we can use that as kind of a bracket for the high and low frame for the rest of the remainder of the day. All right, so that was trade of the week in terms of trying to tie a few things together there. It logged up again on me. What is the train leaving the station to me, or as I said, the secret tell of what a strong stock looks like on a daily chart? It wants nothing to do with that 10 period. If we want to double check it and come in here and say, oh, well, what does it look like with a 5 period? We might get some confirmation. Ah, okay, well maybe, and this would have been what it looked like right there. I'd buy that chart every time, but I'm not using the 10 period, I'm using the 5. So here's our turbo line. We'll coin it and just call it that. I'll change this back. A little bit of time left. We'll go through a few charts and maybe set a few. The ones that were given out last week, I think, did pretty good again. There's our trade of the week on that one. So that one showed up well with a nice return. This one was given out last week, and I remember looking at the super tight wedge, and this thing just took off. This thing was up 7% since we gave that out last week. I wouldn't buy it now. Hell no, at 4 green candles. This is where you should be selling it after we anticipated the move. We broke out of that green line last week. Another long, same kind of a thing, a beautiful sideways action, moving average, forcing the price higher, and it's working. There's our friend Double DOG. We talked about that one. Cliff, this one's on here because I told you I waited for the pullback on that one, so the alert came and it's in, so I can actually turn that one off now. So let's just turn these off. Oh, actually, the ones that didn't work was only this one. And there's the old spike in reverse, and look at that. It gave us a perfect warning system. If you're in this after yesterday's little middle finger and then roll over and close below both these moving averages with a red candle, I would be out. I wouldn't be asking questions. Wouldn't wait for tomorrow. So I don't have a list of ideas, but I'm just going to go through the A table, as I call it, and try and find a few ideas on the jump rope, because these are all just like Neo. You know, this is my list of ideas that have strong fundamentals and kind of high short floats. It's not necessarily scanning for volume. That's the job of Neo, and that's how we've been really looking for our trade of the weeks lately. But just more on the A table here, right off the bat. The first one is always best. The ones that are at the top are at the top for a reason, because they have a high short float. And guess what? This one's at the top, and it's got a very high short float, and it's only got 41 million. So without a doubt, I'm going to mark this one up as one to give away here before we take off. I'm going to actually zoom out a little bit, draw kind of a little line with my eye. I like that trade ideas line right there. You see the profit target? Well, that would be in itself based on a pivot. If you were along here, you could get out that pivot, but if it gets above that pivot, in my book, that's a signal to get long. And I'm going to remind people: low float, high short. This one can really go with that type of setup. I literally just found it as we're speaking. I didn't know. It's just at the top of my list. That's how you use it. Human and machine. Another one that's nicely compressing and consolidating here. Not bad there either. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put it right here above the, here we go, above the target level. Another low, is that low float? Not necessarily, but it's high short. It's a question from Glenn real quick. Does Neo take into consideration resistance levels? I don't know if it takes into consideration resistance levels. That's why, Glenn, we say the real value is in the entry. Look back, and the resistance level should be up to you. You should be able to look back and say, oh boy, there's some resistance coming up. Maybe I'll take that into consideration. But in terms of target, yes, Glenn, in that respect, in terms of target levels hit, at the place in which it will set a target for the day, without a doubt, is set for resistance levels. So maybe I answered that too quick. So it does take into consideration when it's taking profits for a target, but it doesn't necessarily take it into consideration in writing and looking for the scan and finding the stocks for the entry. Once the entry's in there, it will look for resistance. So hope I cleared that up. The next one on here, we'll do a couple more. Again, these ones that are dark, oh boy, look at this. I mean, my examples that I give out week after week are just showing up time after time. It was showing us pretty strong, and this one actually did touch today. And hey, look at this. Let's just have a little bit more fun. What did it do on the open? It spiked right down, made its low in the first 15 minutes, tapped the daily moving average, and that was the reversal for it to go. And what did it do? It held all day long. Now the volume's a little light at 262. I'm not exactly a fan of that, but it went. I don't think that's the one we're going to mark up today. There could be some follow through, but it's pretty light volume. But it's a great example of price action and how it adheres to those moving averages. Here's the one we marked up last week. We're not going to buy it here. Again, remember, the scan's kind of like a jump rope. There's only a few on here that are going to be setting up in phase, in the perfect phase that we want them to be. That phase would have been something like ALLK, yesterday or this morning. But all right, ICPT is next. Well, interestingly enough, look at that. A lot of resistance right there. So we'll just go a tick higher and mark this one up as well. Yeah, I'm gonna get a head start on that line back there. Let's do this one right here. We'll do a couple more. I like to stay towards the top here because this is where most of the short floats are. Oh, look, there's one that's was repelled, got ahead of itself. I wonder where the 5 period lines up on that one. Perfect. It held the 5 period. So I think we've learned something new today, that the 5 period is an interesting, super strong moving average. All right, let's do a couple more and then we'll bring in Scott. Nothing, I don't see anything there. That one's kind of interesting. It kind of had its chance to go yesterday. It's a lower volume. I'm going to pass on that one. Definitely pass. Looks like an acquisition. Not going to chase that. Not bad. Well, definitely wouldn't chase that. And tell you what, we're going to, oh, actually, we'll leave with this one right there. Look at that. That doesn't look bad at all. GBT, decent volume. We'll leave with this one. And I'm going to also add, I'm going to go right above that colored area. I'm going to add, what do we call it? AMD. Because I had mentioned earlier that AMD had that train leaving the station look. Let's just go above that high today. All right, guys, so as Scott gets ready to come in and make a few announcements, I will give out these price alerts. And a reminder, this is the last webinar of the year, so we'll be back in the new year. Share, 5 selected, copy. And I'll go to the chat window there. Alerts, and hopefully all that made sense on what a tell is for a strong looking stock. Thank you, Waleed. Let's see, I think we're all caught up. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Waleed. Thank you, Glenn. All right, so let me bring in the slideshow, and Scott has a couple of parting announcements.
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple things on the way out. We've got a great series of ebooks co-authored by Steve. So make sure you get them. There's 3 books, and they're organized by categories, and each one has 2 chapters, including cloud links, so you can add the strategies to your setups. Just go to trade-ideas.com/setup to get it. We also have a podcast. We'll renew in the new year, so search for Trade Ideas Podcast, add us as a subscription, and then enjoy the new episodes. You can also scroll through the previous episodes to find those interviews that are evergreens, and they're good listens. We've got a code that's good this month, Holly Bells, all caps. It's case sensitive, but that'll save you 15% off the first month or year of any subscription, and also usable for an upgrade. So if you want to upgrade from standard to premium, make sure you do that. Any questions, email info@trade-ideas.com. Goes into our help desk software. It's the best place to send your questions. You can follow Steve on Twitter @TodayTrader. Also follow @TradeIdeas. And Facebook.com/Trade Ideas Pro is the best place to go on Facebook to like our page and share stuff with your friends. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, everyone. Everyone have a great holiday.
All right, see you next year.
Bye.